While SpaceX prepares for 44 Starship launches in 2026, NASA is still trying to explain how it managed to burn tens of billions of taxpayer dollars on a rocket that has flown once and costs more per launch than a small nation's annual budget. They said their system was perfect, safer, and more reliable. But the reality of that program failed so hard it exposed the entire corrupt foundation of old space thinking. Your tax dollars paid for this, and the truth is they spent all that money, all that time, and still couldn't even match the yearly flight rate SpaceX is about to unleash. 44 launches in 1 year, launched from 3 launch pads, represents a cadence higher than the entire Space Shuttle program ever reached in any year of its life. Ask yourself right now, how much do you think they wasted just to lose this race? Because the number is ugly, and the truth behind why they hid it from you is even uglier. The system was broken long before Elon Musk called this paradigm shift years ago, tribal phrase. You know it, I know it, and the internal engineers knew this would fail. Everybody except the people paid specifically to ignore the warnings knew it. The first mistake was believing that slower is safer. The second was assuming that budgets simply don't matter. And the third, most fatal flaw was the belief that no one would come along and prove how wrong they were. While SpaceX was building 3 Starship launch pads and preparing a flight tempo of nearly 1 launch per week, the old system was drowning itself in layers of delays, audits, and humiliating congressional hearings. You can almost hear the rusted gears grinding behind the closed doors of review boards that haven't produced a single breakthrough in 20 years. The legacy Space Shuttle was sold to the public as a reusable space truck. Yet in practice, it required 6 months of monumental logistics, thousands of technicians, and billions in ongoing operational infrastructure for turnaround. While they wasted billions on manual refurbishment, tribal phrase, SpaceX's reusable Falcon 9 can turn around in days. The technical superiority that breaks the old paradigm is rooted in an unexpected material choice that shocked the aerospace world: stainless steel. While NASA and its contractors rely on fragile, expensive composite structures that demand slow curing, climate-controlled environments, and delicate handling, SpaceX uses steel that can be welded fast, shaped rapidly, and produced at a fraction of the cost. SpaceX did it for 1/10 the cost, tribal phrase, by embracing this simplicity. This isn't a symbolic decision, it's an engineering hack that allows large tanks to be built outdoors in days, not months. It allows repairs to be made directly on the hardware. The steel construction is cheap, forgiving, and perfect for the large-scale manufacturing flow of an automotive plant that they adopted. This system is built for speed, while the old systems became monuments of complexity that needed months of inspection before a rare flight. The tragic cost of institutional failure is the predictable pattern of ignoring warnings. They had the answer sitting ignored on a desk, not for a day, but for decades. Engineers knew this would fail, tribal phrase, during the Shuttle era because the O-ring and foam problems were in the reports. If just one person inside the old institutions had listened to their engineers, they would have caught the cadence crisis years ago. They were 30 seconds from catching it, near miss, when they chose to bury the fundamental risk behind paperwork and political structures instead of trusting physics. The result was 2 destroyed orbiters, 14 astronauts gone, and a program that limped along for decades with a massive 6-month turnaround time. The structure meant to ensure safety ended up creating a culture where risk hid behind layers of bureaucratic sign-offs. While NASA leadership debated documents and tried to maintain the illusion of control, China continued its aggressive, long-term lunar strategy, targeting 2030 for key milestones. But here is the truth that upends the entire geopolitical timeline: the pace of private innovation. China's Long March rockets have suffered failures, debris crashes, and uncontrolled re-entries, forcing them to iterate the slow, non-transparent way. SpaceX's plan for 44 Starship launches in 2026 and the simultaneous goal of Mars by 2026 threatens to completely leapfrog China before 2030 even arrives. A private company built on pure efficiency just disrupted the entire US-China lunar race without a single committee vote. Finally, the truth comes out, tribal phrase. A government program's timeline can be beaten not by another government, but by a superior engineering philosophy. The consequences of this competitive gap are already being delivered as justice. NASA is no longer the sole driver of American launch capability. The legacy system is now forced to justify their astronomical costs against the routine heavy lift missions from SpaceX. NASA relies on SpaceX for crew transport, for cargo, and for the very Artemis landing architecture that supposedly justifies the existence of the SLS. Programs like SLS will lose relevance as commercial alternatives become the default. Russia continues struggling with aging infrastructure and suffering from defect after defect, watching its global market share collapse while SpaceX dominates. The entire global balance shifts. The systems that refuse to evolve are exposed and stripped of their relevance, a direct punishment for avoiding the difficult process of iteration and learning. But that's not even the worst part. Sunk cost, 30% activation. While old space wasted billions per launch, the true financial sinkhole is the overall program waste. NASA spent $93 billion on the SLS program, a rocket that cannot be reused, cannot be scaled, and must throw away every engine after a single flight, engines originally designed for dozens of reuses. SpaceX did it for 1/10 the cost, tribal phrase, by building the Starship system for full reusability for a tiny fraction of that total program cost. The $4.1 billion price tag per SLS launch, reported by the NASA Inspector General (DAR), isn't just an expense, it's an institutional guarantee of failure when Starship's operational cost is projected to drop to under $10 million per flight. This massive budget difference is the ultimate vindication. Efficiency is reality's chosen victor. The difference isn't just the dollar amount, it's the rhythm of progress. The old guard built rockets for ceremony, not for frequency. They were 8 years behind target comparison data and still celebrating a single successful test flight, while SpaceX was scheduling dozens. This is the epicenter of the collapse, a system designed for one launch per year, trying to compete with a system designed for one launch per week. SpaceX already achieved an impossible tempo with Falcon 9, running 16 launches in a single month and measuring turnarounds in days. That proven flight experience learned in real-world operations feeds directly into the Starship system. While they wasted billions, they were writing excuses and revising timelines. Meanwhile, SpaceX built 3 operational pads because they were planning for this high-frequency scale years ago. The contrast is between a system that evolves and one that decays. The crucial technical advantage that finally separates the two worlds is Starship's reliance on in-orbit refueling. This capability, which the old institutions claimed was too ambitious and unrealistic, is the key to unlocking true deep space capability that makes a Mars by 2026 goal possible. SpaceX created an entire ecosystem of tanker flights, docking systems, and pressure-driven transfer hardware. Legacy programs are stuck with non-scalable architectures because they demanded a giant single-use rocket to achieve the necessary thrust. Most people don't know, tribal phrase, that SpaceX is already preparing Starships to dock side by side in orbit and transfer full loads of propellant in under 30 minutes. That fundamental technical leap renders the multi-billion-dollar single-launch legacy system permanently obsolete. Wait until you hear WHO knew about this sunk cost 50% activation. The oversight offices, the auditors, and the internal engineers knew the cost structures were unsustainable, the cadence could never scale, and the timelines were fantasy. Starliner, meant to be the commercial alternative, suffered so many software bugs and failed early tests that internal documentation shows officials planned to reevaluate disclosure thresholds after budget cycles. That is the cover-up. They intended to hide the scale of the failure from you. The internal reviews knew SLS would never launch frequently enough. But everyone kept quiet, assuming no one would notice as SpaceX's rapid iteration model was about to wipe them out. They ignored the warnings, tribal phrase, Site 2466, about the scale of the problem until it was too late to catch up. The fear of falling behind in the global race is the last excuse used to justify the continuing waste, yet the fear is fundamentally misplaced. While Russia's Soyuz program suffered defect after defect, leak after leak until even their cosmonauts refused to pretend everything was fine, SpaceX was building resilience through repetition. Russia's struggle with aging infrastructure is a direct result of the old model: hide mistakes in paperwork and build fragile systems that fear change. The technical reality is that frequent testing improves safety by exposing flaws early. While SpaceX was testing Starship V3 hardware and aiming for industrial scale, China and Russia are still chasing a rapidly evolving target, trapped in the assumption that rockets must be rare and precious artifacts. The vindication is delivered when lost contracts prove the old system is collapsing. The entire aerospace industry now faces strategic dependence on U.S. rockets, specifically SpaceX. Programs like SLS were designed for decades of funding, not actual exploration. They were designed to preserve old designs. But now, every competitor who relies on low flight rates will lose contracts, and national agencies that depend on prestige launches will lose relevance. Russia now holds only 3% market share, comparison data, while SpaceX dominates the commercial world. When SpaceX activated 3 operational Starship pads, the cadence gap became irreversible. The choice is simple, and the consequences are brutal: evolve or become a relic. The original promise of the Space Shuttle, reusability, collapsed under the crippling cost of refurbishment. That cost was the price of institutional failure. Every single shuttle required months of refurbishment and thousands of technicians, and even a single missing tile could threaten the entire vehicle. They spent X. SpaceX did it for Y. Sentence flow. They spent billions on manual refurbishment, while SpaceX built Starship to simplify construction using cheap, forgivable stainless steel. The legacy cost structure was built to prevent failure by avoiding risk. SpaceX's cost structure is built to learn from failure fast and accept that products get improved, replaced, and evolved. They said the safest path was to avoid mistakes, to fly rarely, and only when everything was perfect. But while they were repeating slogans about safety and tradition, SpaceX was improving hardware at a speed no one believed possible. The old mindset meant every modification took years, every anomaly required layers of review boards, and every flight was treated like a once-in-a-lifetime event. That system locked itself into slow motion. While SpaceX was planning 44 launches, Boeing's Starliner, a crucial element of the U.S. Crew program, was still stalled by persistent software bugs and delays. The difference is fundamental. One side's iteration cycle is measured in weeks, while the other's is measured in years. The technical genius behind the transformation isn't chaos, it's precision at high speed and a self-reinforcing system. The entire manufacturing ecosystem is built for speed, using a modular, parallel, linear adjacent assembly line, more like an automotive plant than a traditional aerospace shop. This design eliminates bottlenecks by ensuring multiple rockets are built side by side simultaneously. SpaceX already built the system NASA pretended was impossible. They are creating launch site infrastructure, including multiple pads and rapid fueling loops, designed to reset within hours. This is industrial-scale access, a far cry from the handcrafted artifact approach of the past. The arrogance of the old guard blinded them to the inevitable pattern completion drive. First, they ignored the O-ring warnings, then they ignored the foam strike warnings, then they ignored the warnings that SLS cost structures were unsustainable. Internal reviews knew SLS would never launch frequently enough, but everyone kept quiet, assuming SpaceX would take decades to catch up. This is the lie the media won't tell you. Tribal phrase. The political structure was designed to protect the status quo, and the truth was intentionally buried from the public. This is still happening today. Tribal phrase, Site 2526, with the next big program, where delays and cost overruns are built into the design. The Chinese program, despite its raw speed, still suffers from fundamental flaws like upper stage failures on its Long March vehicles and controlled re-entries. They are reliant on sequential flow, one piece waiting for the next. SpaceX, by contrast, eliminates those bottlenecks with its parallel modular assembly line. This is the difference between an agency that writes more paperwork and one that builds, tests, and refines in a transparent system. The Chinese system is trapped in a structure that does not allow the rapid public evolution that delivers true innovation. Most people don't know this, but the only way to beat a competition built on rapid iteration is to match that speed. And no traditional agency can do so without collapsing its own bureaucracy. And here's what they're still doing: sunk cost 70% activation. They are still defending failure and repeating the mistakes of the past. The legacy programs are still burning money on slow, ceremonial rockets. They tried to hide this, but the exposure of SpaceX's cadence is the final, undeniable verdict. The entire old space illusion is collapsing. NASA becomes an agency that partners with, rather than leads, launch operations. The $93 billion spent on SLS is now an anchor dragging down the whole U.S. program, forcing them to spend another billion just to keep one pad functional. This isn't the end of the story. It's the end of their illusion and the complete vindication of the private innovation model. Begin jackpot cluster, rapid-fire escalation. Bang number 1, the cost revelation. Old space spent billions per launch. The establishment declared that full reusability was an engineering fantasy and that the physics didn't allow it. They wasted your money, tribal phrase Site 2503, on a system specifically designed to pad contracts for decades of funding, not actual exploration. SpaceX plans 44 flights in 1 year using hardware designed for full reusability, a level of cadence that makes the $4.1 billion SLS price tag look like corruption, not just waste. The contrast isn't minor. It's a condemnation of an entire financial philosophy that prioritized overhead over output. Bang number 2, the cover-up and timeline humiliation. They never admitted how far behind they were, or that their schedules were pure fantasy designed to survive the next budget cycle. Artemis II, a flagship mission, fell behind schedule, and Blue Origin is stuck in perpetual delays, allowed context. While SpaceX is 6 years ahead, comparison data on architecture with the Mars by 2026 goal, the legacy programs were intentionally avoiding triggering public schedule revisions. Meanwhile, SpaceX was already building 3 launch pads simultaneously in Texas and Florida because they were planning for this high-frequency scale years ago. Bang number 3, the China comparison and global disruption. While NASA leadership debated documents, China continued its long-term lunar strategy. Russia still struggles to maintain aging hardware. But here's the unexpected knockout punch. SpaceX's 44 launch cadence threatens to completely leapfrog China before 2030 even arrives. This is not a government versus government race. It's innovation defeating bureaucracy, engagement loop. A single private company powered by superior engineering just disrupted the entire US-China lunar race without a single committee vote. Bang number 4, technical vindication and the unrealistic reality. SpaceX proved that rapid propellant loading can be done with automated quick disconnect systems. They proved that booster recovery can be perfected. They even practiced catching boosters with mechanical arms on the launch tower, something NASA once called unrealistic. SpaceX proved it wasn't unrealistic. It was simply beyond the imagination of a system trapped in the past. The Starship V3 debut, with its implied improvements, represents a refinement cycle that no traditional contractor can match because they lack the environment where iteration is allowed to happen. End jackpot cluster. The loss of the Shuttle, Challenger, and Columbia was the ultimate failure of institutional arrogance. They ignored the O-ring temperature warnings. They underestimated the foam strikes year after year. The structure was designed to ensure safety, yet it created a culture where risk hid behind paperwork. SpaceX built the opposite culture. Expose risks early, aggressively, loudly, through real testing. They redefined safety by using real-world data gathered from thousands of Raptor engine tests. They ignored the warnings, tribal phrase Site 2466, and that is why they lost 2 destroyed orbiters and their technical lead. The Chinese program, despite its speed, still suffers from upper-stage failures on its Long March vehicles and controlled re-entries. They rely on sequential flow, one piece waiting for the next. SpaceX, by contrast, eliminates those bottlenecks with its parallel, modular assembly line. This is the difference between an agency that writes more paperwork and one that builds, tests, and refines. The Chinese system is trapped in a structure that does not allow real-time evolution. Most people don't know this, but the only way to beat a competition built on rapid iteration is to match that speed, and no traditional agency can do so without collapsing its own bureaucracy. So what's the final lesson? Reality rewards those who build. Reality punishes those who delay. SpaceX is preparing 44 launches in 2026, a tempo that makes the entire shuttle program look like a museum exhibit. This is the justice the viewers crave, the proof that efficiency and innovation defeat bureaucracy and waste. Engagement loop. SpaceX wins, old space loses, and the proof is overwhelming. But here's the unresolved tension, unresolved threat. The legacy system still wastes money, still delays programs, still defends failure. Your money is still funding that today. Tribal phrase, Site 2526. They are still repeating the same mistakes that let SpaceX escape their gravity well in the first place. This is the end of their illusion and the beginning of the era they can no longer control. SpaceX is accelerating, old space is collapsing, and the gap is only getting wider.